Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my name is Anne Beate Tvinnereim. I'm Minister of International Development of Norway, and I'll be kicking us off for this next session. And I am thrilled to see that an often overlooked issue in our energy discussions have finally gotten its rightful attention. We must make clean cooking our priority. We're way off track. We must drastically scale up our efforts to achieve the SDG 7. SDG 7 is not just a target, it's a cornerstone for addressing poverty, economic growth, and safeguarding our planet. So, how can we mobilize the needed resources? Let me mention 3 points to start with. First, mobilizing the scale and quality of finance that is needed will require an approach that boosts all sources of finance, public and private, domestic and international, and which uses their complementary strengths. Second, domestic resource mobilization is central. Countries will need to implement a mix of policies to raise domestic revenues, including boosting taxation and introducing cost-reflective tariffs. Elimination of harmful subsidies and implementation of carbon taxation can generate needed revenues. Third, we need to scale up partnerships that actually deliver. It is not the number of partnerships that matter, but the scale and the quality of it. Colleagues, reaching universal access to clean cooking fuels will depend on strong national leadership, and we see great examples of national leadership here today. Universal clean cooking access was recognized as a priority issue for African governments and the international community at the Nairobi Climate Summit last year. Strategies taken by countries will depend on the local context. Each country must have a sovereignty to shape their agenda for people-centered energy transitions. Before giving the floor to our moderator, Dr. Kevin Kariuki, Vice President of the African Development Bank, let me briefly provide some detail on what Norway is doing to support clean cooking in Africa. As our Prime Minister just announced this morning, we're committed to provide approximately $50 million to clean cooking. Our primary partners are the World Bank's Clean Cooking Fund, to which Norway was the first contributor. We also work with the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, SEFA, set up by the African Development Bank, the Energizing Development Program, the Modern Cooking Facility for Africa managed by NEFCO, and the World Food Program. Clean cooking is also a key component in some of our energy programs, for instance, in Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Mozambique. We also provide support to the private sector, several companies which are present here today. So, colleagues, providing clean cooking to all is a really smart investment. It's not charity, it's an investment. Clean cooking empowers education, it empowers healthcare, gender equality and economic growth, and it is great resource management. It saves our climate and it saves our biodiversity. So with this, over to you, Kevin.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Minister and my co-chair, for the kind introduction. I am very pleased to moderate this panel that will be focusing on mobilizing private and public sector financing for access to clean cooking in Africa. I think it's been a common theme throughout this summit that financing holds the key to catalyzing progress in clean cooking. Accelerating progress in this vital issue to hundreds of millions of Africans is a matter of priority, action, and collaboration. As we heard this morning very articulately from the WHO Director General, eating and breathing are supposed to provide life, not to kill. So in that regard, the discussion comes really at a critical time as we head to COP29, which will have a major focus on climate finance. It is with this pleasure that I moderate this panel and will delve into the mechanisms for mobilizing various types of funding, emphasizing the need to mobilize greater resources and commitments to clean cooking access. In this regard, I would like to introduce you to our distinguished panelists. Starting with my sister Amani Abu-Zeid, who is the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission. Second is His Excellency Eamon Ryan, Minister of Environment, Climate and Communications from Ireland. Welcome. Third, His Excellency and a colleague, Honorable Davis Chirchir, Minister of Energy and Petroleum from Kenya. Next is Her Excellency Mila Azibail, Minister of Delegate of the President of the Republic in charge of Energy and Mines. Mila? Okay. Then we have Shrikant Madhav Vaidya, Chairman of India Oil Corporation Limited. We also have Mr. Admasu Tadese, the President and Managing Director of TDB, my good friend from Kenya again. And finally, but by no means least, we also have Marcos Brent, the Global Director of EIB. Marcos? I will start with my sister, Her Excellency Amani Abu-Zeid. The African Union Commission has been committed to advancing the energy access and clean cooking agenda across the continent. From your perspective, and in the light of commitments we've had earlier today, how would we best mobilize the needed public and private financing to shift or move the needle on clean cooking access on the continent?
Thank you very much, Kevin, my brother, and allow me at the outset to thank the IEA and the chairs of this conference, of this forum, and to remind everyone that this is really a turning point. It particularly pleases me that while I'm ending my second mandate at the African Union, that a long battle that we have been heralding for the continent for clean cooking that lasted almost 12 years is finally bearing fruit. The major obstacle has been visibility and acknowledgement of this, of the issue of clean cooking as a critical subject when it comes to energy and energy access. So I'm really happy that this is happening now. Clean cooking, as you all know, or some of you know already, the African Union is devising the master plan for energy for the continent, and through our agency, AFRIC, we have the African framework for clean cooking, ensuring that there is also an approach that is regional and transcontinental when it comes to energy in general, but particularly for clean cooking. Regarding finance, I liked very much what was said earlier. We should shift the problem from being, a problem into an opportunity. Clean cooking, when you see the value chain, immense possibilities for private sector at different sizes, medium, large, and small, and also opportunities for employment. And I take the example of my own country, Egypt. Egypt, in only a number of years, 4 years, I mean, there are connected 13 million households with natural gas. But since the 80s, Egypt has localized the manufacturing of and the storage of LPG and distribution, and this is done by the private sector. So there is an element of creating this opportunity for the private sector to operate at this level, and also to have lines of credit in local banks for the population to access possibilities for clean cooking, whether it's stoves or whether it is, you know, the last mile when it comes to connections. They do it credit that is zero interest over several years. So it picked up very quickly, and now 60% of a country of 110 million people have access to clean cooking. I'm saying this, I know that there are fantastic examples in Ghana, in Kenya, in Rwanda. The way we are marketing clean cooking has to be one based on business opportunities, on employment, on local manufacturing, and that is how we're going to attract both local and international finance. Happy with the pledges that took place, that happened this morning, but for everyone to understand, and also was emphasized by Norway, not two countries are the same in terms of the solution when it comes to clean cooking. Also, not two regions or areas in a country are the same when it comes to clean cooking. What is useful for a building is not the same thing as in rural areas. And last but not least, I know that time is almost up, we cannot disassociate clean cooking from the overall energy issue in the continent. We cannot talk about electric stove when there is no electricity to start with. So we have to also bear in mind that there's a greater issue of energy on the continent. However, clean cooking is a low-hanging fruit that can work very fast, thanks to the finance that was raised now and could be mobilized in the future, making sure that it also mobilizes shows the private sector the opportunities that there is, private sector, local private sector, and international as well. And as I said, this is proven. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen transformation in my own country, and it is doable. Let us all, and I'm happy with the commitment by all the partners here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abu Zaid, Your Excellency. I think we hear the specificities of clean cooking in different countries, the interlinkage between energy, electricity access, and clean cooking, and you know, the example you gave of how Egypt went to increase access to clean cooking in a big way. So thank you very much for your very helpful comments. Then I'll go to Your Excellency, Ryan. And the question I have for you, Your Excellency, from Ireland's perspective, how would we envision the role of concessionally and private financing to be most effective for advancing clean cooking access?
I'm going to repeat a lot of what has just been said. That's not a bad thing, because I do think we need both. And I think today was the example. The way today was structured, where both government, African Development Bank, private financing, we need, in the climate negotiations in finance in Baku this autumn, we're going to have to agree new goals for finance. And in my mind, it has to be layered. And so we need both private and concessional, government and development bank. I think what the role of each maybe slightly differs. Firstly, I think we should be really facilitating private investment and development and capability, particularly in African countries. So it should not be crowding that out. It should be supporting it by lowering the cost of capital, is the main role in my mind of the concessional finance, to de-risk projects, to bring down the cost of capital, but not to take the place of the private enterprise sector. We need to deliver what was agreed in Nairobi Declaration last year, which is climate and development together. And I think that, so that role is to lower the risk. In what ways? Trying to lower the currency risk. Because if it's manufactured locally, that's lowered. Or if the source of materials is close to where they're used, that lowers currency risk. So I think that's the first. Secondly, I would argue that a good reporting system. I was taken today what Fatih Birol, Dr. Birol came back and said consistently, the IEA is a data organization. And what he was saying earlier on is, we will track the 2.2 billion which has been committed to here today. The benefit of that would be not just to hold people to account for pledges that they've made, but also when you have accurate reporting on the flow of materials, the flow of energy, and the flow of finance, right down to the customer, then I think it's a very good way of de-risking projects and lowering the cost of capital and getting much greater opportunity and development happening. So the second, I think that reporting mechanism, often down, now it's difficult, as Mo Ibrahim said in the last panel, what happens if we're down to a very small scale here? We might not have an identity of a particular household. But I think particularly if there's any grid being built or any infrastructure being built with it, having good reporting is a really good way of de-risking projects. And lastly, I'd say just in terms of this, what's the role of concessional? I think today one of the real benefits is we have a sense of the scale of the investment needed. 4 billion each of the next 6 years, just for Africa and clean access. If we think about that in the wider climate context, we know from the IEA that 4.5 trillion is needed for the clean energy transition each year. 4 billion in that context starts to look very small, particularly because it's a combination of private and public. So this is not impossible. And surely as a way of winning confidence for the wider negotiations, for the wider challenge of bringing development and climate together, this is a perfect project to start.
Thank you very much. I think Your Excellency has been very clear on the distinct roles between public and private, and the role of public is basically to catalyze or de-risk projects in order to be able to attract more private sector financing, because I think we always say that we need more private sector financing, because public sector will never be enough for the work that we need to do. So I'll go to Honorable Chirchir. And the question I have for you, Honorable Chirchir, is, Your Excellency, could you give us your view on what the biggest challenges are that Kenya is facing in achieving universal access to clean cooking, and what support is needed from international partners to overcome this?
Let me initially, Kevin, acknowledge the great work IEA is doing through Dr. Fatih Birol, bringing us together to really give life to this very important subject of clean cooking. And on behalf of Kenya, I want to congratulate what IEA is doing, and possibly take another second to invite all of us to Nairobi next week when we talk to energy efficiency in a forum that has also been organized by International Energy Agency. Kevin, Kenya really prioritizes the issue of clean cooking transition, and we have aligned the country to grow clean cooking to almost 100% before the turn of 2030. And we've got various strategies to be able to do that. The biggest challenge, Kevin, like you asked, is if you talk to the area of investment in gas using private capital, the big investors in Vitol, Total Energy, and the big investors have a challenge of cross-filling of their cylinders. And today we are employing technology in Kenya with a new strategy to ensure that the new cylinders coming are fitted with RFID technology, which can help the investors to put more of their capital into rolling out some of these cylinders. The biggest challenge, of course, in clean cooking in Africa is poverty. I think what we're really not talking to is affordability of the clean cooking facilities, the cost of entry, which is one of the key objectives in terms of what are some of the challenges inhibiting clean cooking in the continent. If you talk to the cylinder at $20, which is really a one-off cost that must be expensed to be able to access gas, or to that extent what Cocoa is doing, the initial cost of entry is a big challenge. And what we're trying to do is to grow that space, and as government have policies which address how do we get those living below the poverty line to access and overcome this cost of entry, bring in enough competition. But what we're doing in Kenya today to basically address the issue is putting so much investment into this space from a government policy perspective to be able to achieve what I've said 2030 target of clean cooking for all, because it's not only an health challenge, it's also a dignity for our women and children to ensure that we do access clean cooking per se for all. We have a program today where we are trying to bring down the cost of clean cooking, particularly gas, bringing in big ship. We want to leverage on our geopositioning of Mombasa to bring in big vessels for Kenya, for Uganda, for Rwanda, and enjoy the volume of the scale of investment in bringing in a bigger ship. We have a program of subsidizing cylinders as an entry cost of entry through carbon trading, where we are registering clean cooking initiative as we start the program with some of the carbon credit gold standards companies, rather organizations, to ensure that we are able to invest the carbon credits that we earn to continuously reduce the cost of LPG, reduce the cost of bioethanol, denatured bioethanol, and ensure that the challenge of poverty with respect to clean cooking is addressed. Otherwise, from a business perspective, it continues to be a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, C.S. Chirchir. I think you brought in some very useful ideas in terms of standardization and also the issue of affordability. I think I hear you saying the various things that the government of Kenya is doing to be able to attract greater investments. But I'm sure that along with what His Excellency Ryan said, I think we'll make sure that although we subsidize, we do not crowd out the private sector. So I'll go next to Mr. Shrikant Mandav from India Oil Corporation. I have a question for you. Mr. Vadia, from the successful clean cooking progress achieved in India in the past years, can you tell us what has worked to mobilize much needed financial support between public and private financing? What has been the experience in India shown about effectively attracting private sector capital to clean cooking?
Thank you very much. To begin with, I would just like to thank the IEA for this wonderful summit that they have made, because this was one issue that it was always there, but we were not looking at it. Just to give you a perspective how this sector has been neglected. This sector is, I'm talking about the clean cooking sector. It emits about 1 gigaton of CO2 every year. Something similar to the aviation sector. About 2.5% of the global emissions come from the cooking sector as it is, or the aviation sector. And can you believe that the aviation sector has pledged every year $179.5 billion up to 2050 to become net zero. And today we are gathered here for mere $4 billion. So what we are asking is just 2.5% of the budget of the aviation sector. So I think it's absolutely doable. It's only a question of will that we all need to understand. And I'm sure the gathering here has shown that the will is there for us to go for the clean cooking regime. Now, coming down to the Indian scenario, I would like to just add that up to 2010, gasoline was in the regime where the prices were controlled. It was liberated in 2010. In 2014, the diesel was regulated. So it was, deregulated. So it was floating with the international prices. And whatever the under-recoveries which were gathering because of the price control regime earlier, that was stopped, and the government directed this to a very specific sector, that is the LPG sector. So it was basically moving away from the subsidy regime of the petrol and diesel to the LPG sector. And nearly $5.9 billion worth LPG subsidy was given for raising the 56% of the population to the clean cooking regime. And out of that, $3 billion was by the government of India, and balance, as my colleague from the ministry said, it was from the oil marketing companies, that is Indian Oil, which I represent, and BPCL and HPCL. So it was basically a cross-allocation of the budget of the fossil fuels to the targeted sector of the LPG. So I think this is a very doable model. But here I want to just add that the IT infrastructure has to be absolutely in place for the LPG scheme to be actually a big success. Because we should know identity of each and every person, where do they stand in the socio-economic sector, so that the LPG subsidies can be directly transferred to their bank accounts. So I think along with the LPG infrastructure, the IT sector also has to be very much strengthened. Only then that the fruits of the subsidy can reach the real beneficiaries. So by and large, what I'm saying is that this is a very much doable an issue, and the funds are not a problem. It's just a question of will. And I think that will is seen when this packed audience and the esteemed dignitaries we had today morning. So I think we should be overcoming this by 2030 as one of the goals by which we can be at least very proud to say that the women are getting a fair deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've been very, very clear. Political will is everything. There is possibility for cross-subsidization, especially from the oil sector to clean cooking. I think that's fantastic. I think it's a good model, and I think it's something I'm sure my colleagues, CS, Chirchir, Amani, and colleagues would be able to borrow as we try to address this issue of clean cooking in sub-Saharan Africa, in Africa.
Small point.
Yes, please.
We talk so much of aviation sector. I mean, just 2.5% to 3% of what the budget is required. I think we should be really looking at the facts down there and not in the skies.
Thank you. And what you are saying is that it's doable. The amount of money required is actually doable. So with the support and goodwill of our governments, should not be too difficult. Then I'll go to my friend, the CEO of TDB Bank, Mr. Admasu Tadesse. How, in your view, Bwana Tadesse, do we best implement concessional finance in order to incentivize the private sector financing in clean cooking initiatives?
Thank you, Kevin. Very quickly, let me jump into that. I think we're all talking about will, and how do we manifest the will in reality in practical terms. And of course, blending becomes a very important response to that sort of question. And what we've been doing very practically over the past 12 months is to try to build out new facilities that would bring concessional finance in from a blending perspective and make available attractive funding to the private sector so that they can actually build out. TDB works in Eastern and Southern Africa, a little bit in West Africa as well. And we know that we're solving for about 250 to 300 million people to get out of the energy poverty space, and specifically in the cooking area. And so we've just rolled out a new facility of 250 million to kick off, that is in US dollar terms. And we've struck very smart partnerships. So we've launched a smart partnership with the World Bank Group and with the African Development Bank on the other side. One is on the debt side and concessional funding, the other is equity. And so in case people are curious what I'm talking about, we issued what is called green equity, green shares, which is a very novel instrument in our industry, to build out the risk capital that would then be the base to attract debt funding, including concessional finance, that would then be able to blend and make available not just facilities, but instruments for de-risking to enable these nascent companies in these new technology areas to actually get traction on the ground. And so alongside the 250 million facility that I referred to, we have a $50 million grant facility that is being managed by our strategic partner, COMESA. And jointly, we are actually trying to build out the pipeline but also at the same time working on the ecosystem around the policy space, the regulatory space, the agencies at national level who have an important role to play to ensure that these investments don't get caught up in bottlenecks and all the types of barriers that we tend to see. The truth is we are living in an age where cost of capital has become exceedingly high, right? And so it was always hard as it was. Now it's a whole lot harder. And this is where our smart partnerships with the World Bank Group has really come in to enable us to make a facility like this available on much more affordable terms. So it's not just the pricing, but it's also the tenor. We also have a strategic partner from Denmark, which is the IFU, which is also coming in to work closely with us on some of these novel instruments. And I'd like to thank Denmark for its proactive engagement and coming to the party the same way the World Bank and the African Development Bank did. So for any companies that are here, I've bumped into a couple of my clients, prospective clients. We're working through your appraisals as we speak. But for any new companies who are looking for financing, we're wide open for business, not just financing. We can work with you on instruments. We can help you with technical assistance. And we can also hear you out in terms of what you are finding as being obstacles in the operating environment, so we can then connect you to some of the other facilities that are helping to de-risk.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bwana Tadesse. I think we've heard of smart partnerships and innovation. Those are the key buzzwords that are required in order to ensure that you maximize the resources that you have and blend accordingly. So I'll go back lastly to Marcus from EIB. I'll say you've heard from Tadesse. Is there anything that you would want to add from what you've heard? Okay? In other words, how we can be able to elevate this financing problem even more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, that's a very good question, because otherwise I would have had to repeat many great things that have been said on this panel. If you ask me what to add, I think one thing I would like to add is this development that we had in recent years, which is the carbon credits. And I think that is a game changer in this particular market. So I just want to echo what has been said before by Peter Scott from Bern and others, because here we have the possibility to rely on the carbon finance to bring down the price significantly of clean cooking equipment. And if we combine this, which I think is a bit of a game changer in this industry, if we combine this with a holistic approach that then also combines instruments as Atmasa has just mentioned, we really this time have a chance to scale up very significantly what we have started. So I would like just to use the occasion again to thank the organizers for this conference, because I think the very first problem that we have is that it's not very clear how important this issue is. It's at the center of climate action and at the center of health, especially for women and children, and it's very much overlooked. But at this very moment of time, thanks to these carbon credits, we really have a chance to address it. We can bring down the cost of production very significantly, and if we roll this out in a smart and holistic way, I think we are at a very good time to tackle this challenge. And then, of course, linked to that, we would hope that at some point we can move from the current voluntary carbon market to one that is linked to mandatory carbon reduction requirements. And then I think we really have a chance to solve this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcos. I think you've sort of delved into an area that we are going into in the next session, and this is the issue of carbon markets. First of all, I really would like us to give the...
No, before you... No, it's not finished. Because we all spoke and you did not speak about what the ADB is doing in that. Now, I think it's up to you now. You have 2 minutes now. You should tell us what are you doing.
I think you all heard in the morning that I was locked up in a room and I had to come up with a solution to clean cooking. And that's how we came up with the idea of mobilizing $2 billion over a period of 10 years. And just to explain how this works is as follows. You know, as I was telling C.S. Churchill, and the minister from Senegal, no, so from Togo, we don't own the resources that we lend to the countries. These resources actually do belong to the countries. So what we do is that if we have a lending program of, say, $100 million, we would go to that country and say, yes, we are doing electricity access for $100 million, but can we carve out a portion of these resources for purposes of clean cooking? And so we can actually be able to hive off $20 million. And so in a year, we do about $1 billion of financing in energy. And so that's why we say in a year, we can easily do $200 million per year. But that's not all. We are actually already practicing this. As C.S. Churchill would confirm, we have a project that we are calling Last Mile Connectivity Project in Kenya. So we actually put our mouths where our money is. And in this particular project, there is a particular component of clean cooking in that particular project. So we are already walking the talk. And thank you for putting me on the spot. This is the problem of having sisters on the same platform.
Thank you. I'll just add to what you said is to develop African value chains for that. All the resources we need, whether human resources, manufacturing resources, distribution, companies that have the expertise on the whole value chain for clean cooking exist in Africa. We rely on African Development Bank and other partners to develop also the African value chains in order, to use this opportunity as a catalyst for our private sector at all levels, and I think.
And I want to assure you, you will not find us wanting. We are your partners, and we are committed to ensuring clean cooking for all by 2030. But before I finalize and ask for us to clap for this wonderful panel that we've had, there's one other announcement that I wanted to make today. We've heard about the importance of blended finance as far as making clean cooking access affordable. Here, you may have heard, and it was alluded to by the Minister of Finance of Denmark, we have a facility at the bank called the Sustainable Energy Fund for All. It has been absolutely transformational as far as the issue of access to clean cooking, access to electricity, especially for distributed renewable energy systems. So here, we are actually going to create a facility called the Africa Clean Cooking Program as part of this Sustainable Fund, Energy Fund for Africa. And what we'll be doing here is that we just want to mobilize to kickstart about $50 million to be able to kickstart this particular program. And we will be leveraging on the tried and tested catalytic track record of the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa as far as electricity access in distributed renewable energies is concerned. So I wanted to share that. That is over and above the $2 billion I've talked about. We are going to be mobilizing another $50 million that is only to kickstart this particular program. So now I can actually ask all of you, please give it to this wonderful panel. You've all heard about it. Thank you very much for sharing your invaluable insights throughout this discussion. The insight just had come at a critical time as we heard from IEA and other leading voices about concrete commitments to clean cooking access, and as we head towards COP29, and climate finance discussions are actually underway. We take note, and there is an important opportunity space to strike an efficient balance between public sector financing and attracting private sector funding for clean cooking based on experience we've heard from India that has been, and Egypt that has been shared by our speakers. I'll now hand over to my co-chair, Minister of International Development from Norway, for the next session. Thank you.
A big hand for this great panel, forward-leaning. operationalizing the endeavors that we have in front of us. Thank you for that. This was very inspiring. And thank you, Kevin, for excellent moderating with the good help of Madam Commissioner. We will go straight to our next panel, which I think will be just as concrete and inspirational, with the title Scaling Up New Streams of Finance, New Financing Instruments, Funding Sources and Carbon Credits. And to moderate this panel, I am very pleased to invite on stage Joseph Nganga, who is Interim Managing Director and Vice President for Africa for GEAP, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Joseph, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Panelists, please join me on stage. You know yourselves. I don't need to name you. Please join me. Thank you. So, we're talking about financing, and we move to how to catalyze financing for the sector. But before we hear from the panelists, one point to mention, and a number of you have referenced the Africa Climate Summit and the declaration, and the climate finance conversation around climate finance not being independent from development. What also came out of the summit was that we need to focus our climate finance where we get the highest impact per dollar. The previous panel talked about the aviation industry spending $170 billion a year to get to net zero by 2050 or 2090. And yet, we can get to net zero for clean cooking by 2030 with $4 billion a year. Now, the question to you and the panelists is, how do we change the thinking and the conversations to get that $4 billion flowing? Because per dollar, you get the highest climate impact, not to mention the core benefits. So, panelists, you have no room for being modest, you have no room for being small, you need to think big. We have a challenge to solve in 6 years. Yeah? Excellent. So, I will start with Matthias from UNFCCC. And the question I have for you is, in light of the commitments made earlier today, as well as what we've heard from panelists in the previous sessions, what is your view on how we should unlock new streams of finance for clean cooking projects at the scale needed?
Thanks, that's a challenge. First of all, could I just say, in addition to tracking the commitments on finance being made today, I hope we can also track and follow up on all the various commitments in terms of policy and the great ideas being presented throughout the day, because it's really, there's so many good ideas out there, and I hope we can build on that and follow up on also on all those issues. As the Swedish Climate Ambassador, I'd like to just raise, take your question and use as an example the journey of a company called Emerging Cooking Solutions, or Supermoto, and how they have unlocked streams of finance in order to answer your question. They began by convincing a Swedish entrepreneur that commercializing clean cooking was not only essential, but also feasible. And over the years, they have experimented and fine-tuned both production processes as well as tested various business models. And during this time, their initial equity investment was blended with a couple of challenge fund awards, allowing them to test and develop their business model for how to make a fuel and make their business model work. So with the support of these various challenge funds financing, they were also able to mature their business. And in 2017, they achieved a milestone by securing a contract from the Swedish-funded Beyond the Grid Fund for Zambia. So this not only validated their work, but also paved the way for further financing, including turning to crowdfunding platforms like Trine and Lend a Hand to raise commercial funding from individual investors. So just as a couple of examples of how this one single company have then expanded their financial power to build also their business model. And in the end of 2023, they secured a contract under the Modern Cooking Facility for Africa. They're now committed to delivering modern cooking solutions to about 150,000 people in Zambia. And also the amount awarded through the MCFA is complemented by a commitment to raise 5 million euro in additional debt and equity funding. So here again, a couple of examples of how which I think also mirrors other clean cooking companies and exemplifies how public financing, strategically timed, can unlock opportunities and also propel the sector forward. Currently, from a Swedish perspective, we're financing, our current portfolio is 75 million euro, also facilitating another 30 million in loans. And we are there to be sort of supporting our partner countries in the needs and priorities that they put forward. And so also exploring the potential for using Article 6, for example, in Ghana. And I think also, as has been said by many earlier today, making sure that we have the right kind of policies in place will also unlock the kind of finance which is needed for a greater scale. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you for that very clear example. And the talk of carbon credits. Jules, it's very clear that, again, emerging out of the Africa Climate Summit, that one particular project in one of the countries in Africa, which I'm not allowed to mention just yet, with a carbon price of $50 a ton, they could implement clean cooking for schools that would feed 10 million children. How do we unlock this carbon market to drive clean cooking at the scale we are talking about?
Thank you, Joseph. And yes, we are finishing up today with the same subject that we started off this morning in the session hosted by the Clean Cooking Alliance. The answer is the carbon market. The answer is the carbon market because in addition to all the beautiful commitments that we heard here today, we can mobilize capital at the scale of billions of dollars per year from that market if we get one critical thing right. And that critical thing is trust. The carbon market in which we operate essentially awards my company and many others for saying, trust me, we have avoided a ton of carbon or we have sequestered a ton of carbon. And in order to mobilize that trust, which is essentially what we do, we need to do three things. First, we need to continue to innovate to drive the quality of the solutions that we bring to the global clean cooking market. We need to innovate not just in the mechanical engineering part, the fuel, the chemistry, but we particularly also need to innovate on the digital side, on the MRV side, so that we can actually prove that a ton is really a ton. That leads me to the second point. We have to do that with rigorous integrity. As we heard this morning, this is not easy. It is not easy operating on the ground in Africa and be very precise in counting every ton of carbon for every ton of carbon. But we're getting better at it. And new methodologies being established, such as by the 4C consortium, will allow us to do that counting with integrity. And then finally, we need to do this in a transparent manner. We need to put on the table crystal clear what we have achieved. We need to be, as they call it in the business world, radically transparent. Demonstrate what we've done, how that has contributed to climate mitigation, and how it has delivered on the co-benefits, SDG benefits, for the communities that we work in. And very importantly, as one of those critical co-benefits, how we share the benefits from the work that we do with governments and with the beneficiaries of the villages in which we operate. So carbon markets, quality, integrity, and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jules, for that. Clearly, carbon markets can be a source of financing for clean cooking. Ms. Hassan, From Benin's perspective, when you hear these conversations around the possible financing opportunities and revenue streams for funding clean cooking, from a government perspective, what is your view? Where do you feel that this conversation can actually be translated to actual projects on the ground?
Thank you for the question. So good afternoon, everyone. I think that I would talk, as you were saying, on behalf of the Republic of Benin, to share actually our nation's commitment as an example and a strategic advancement that has been made to achieving our climate goals, especially through our national determined contribution. Our commitment in Benin is clear. We aim to transform the lives of more than 255,000 households by promoting access to clean cooking equipment and utilizing subsidies and credit facility to facilitate adoption by local population. We heard since this morning all the commitment, financial commitment that are coming from all the institutions, government, and the initiative in Benin not only addresses environmental concern, but significantly enhance the health and economic stability of our people. However, our ambitions are grand, and to realize them, we seek stronger collaboration with the private sector. Recent developments in Benin have shown a surge in interest from private sectors, eager to contribute to our clean cooking project. Yet, this enthusiasm has also presented challenges, particularly in governance. You were mentioning integrity. I will talk about governance. I mean, to make all these financial flows coming, to have a strong pipeline of projects, we need a governance, a strong one. And without this, without the oversight of Benin National Carbon Authority that has been set, called AEPC, we believe that we would have faced reputational risk and operational risk by developing projects without governance. These risks included ensuring projects meet the highest standards and that they are executed in a manner that is both effective and acceptable to our communities. To address this concern, Benin has devised a robust risk mitigation strategies. These include a detailed governance plan to ensure the coherence and coordinated rollout of this project across our territories. This plan grows from our successful National Voluntary Sustainable and Land Management and Soil Regenerative Plan. This will facilitate a reliable market for carbon credit, benefiting both our country and potential investors. In conclusion, as we stand at this critical juncture in the fight against climate change, Benin is committed to transparency, innovation, and collaboration. Let us not forget that clean cooking is only one of the many challenges that Africa faces in its energy transition, from production to distribution to efficiency, and ensuring then energy access to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment on the perspective of government and how that support from private sector and carbon markets can unlock clean cooking in Benin. Franz from World Bank, every time you walk in a room, I'm sure people see a big check. How do we make sure that, from your perspective, given that it's only $4 billion, that should be quite easy for you to write. But what does it take for governments and private sector and the actors in this space to access World Bank funding to drive investment in clean cooking?
Thanks, Joseph. It's a pleasure to represent the World Bank at this super important conference. We've been committed to clean cooking for a long time, and we want to do more. And let me tell you how. We've had the Clean Cooking Fund since 2019, and I'll say more about that in just a second. But I also want to let you know that just last month at the IMF World Bank spring meetings, we announced the commitment to electrify 300 million people in sub-Saharan Africa by 2030. 300 million people together with the African Development Bank. And we expect clean cooking to be an integral part of that big scale up. We've been lending about $3 billion a year for energy writ large in sub-Saharan Africa. We expect to take that up to $5 billion a year. Now, what does it take, your specific question, to unlock these new streams of financing? Essentially, in our view, it's about creating markets. You have to create markets that attract the private sector, markets for clean cooking, for cook stoves, for appliances, LPG cylinder, and other accessories. So setting standards so that you know what clean cook stoves qualify for financing, having adequate labeling, and then having testing laboratories for those cook stoves that wish to qualify for results-based financing. That's how you create a market, right? You release that money, results-based financing, to private operators when they provide targeted cook stoves to poor households. And when you then take that results-based financing and combine it with carbon credits, you get an incredibly powerful combination. Because a lot of people have said this, basically the carbon emissions of all of the non-clean, the unhealthy cooking right now is significant. It's the size of the aviation sector or the shipping sector. But it's much, much cheaper to abate. It's much cheaper to abate, and of course the socioeconomic benefits of that for women's health, for time wasted collecting firewood, etc., are many times more important. So let me just give you a few examples of what that means in practice. When we launched the Clean Cooking Fund in 2019, we got $107 million in contributions from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, and the UK. And I want to acknowledge your support. Thank you. That money leveraged $230 million from the IDA and IBRD allocations of sub-Saharan African countries and others, and $320 million from the private sector. So every dollar that went into the Clean Cooking Fund leveraged 5. With that, we were able to provide 40 million people in 10 countries with clean cooking solutions. We're not stopping there. We want to take that $100 million and raise it to $500 million by 2030. Let me just give you an example of what that means concretely. Rwanda's come up a couple of times. We had the Minister of Environment on the previous panel. Rwanda got $10 million from IDA, $10 million from that Clean Cooking Fund, and $11 million in carbon credits. They used that to accredit 18 different firms that provided clean cooking stoves to 1 million people so far. That's a lot in a country the size of Rwanda. And that 1 million, by the time the project is finished, will be 2 million. We've just approved a project called Ascent that was mentioned too, I think, by the colleague from TDB Bank in the previous panel. It's basically a program to provide 100 million people with electricity and 20 million people with clean cooking solutions in East and Southern Africa by 2030. Next month, we're going to go to our board with a project for Ghana, $260 million, that's going to provide 500,000 households in Ghana with LPG clean cooking solutions, the same for 260 schools and about 7,000 commercial caterers. So there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot that we can scale up. Please join us. We need partners. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Thank you very much for that. And clearly a lot has gone into thinking around this at the World Bank, and the door is open for collaboration. Thank you. Eric, from your perspective, we're talking about innovative technologies for clean cooking. But from where you sit, what are some of the innovative strategies that we can apply towards financing clean cooking as well?
Yeah, thanks. I'm representing a Norwegian energy company. It's great to be here. This conference addresses more than half the Sustainable Development Goals. So what better topic to discuss? The starting point here is that of missing money and lack of availability of energy. We have a massive need for clean energy, growing number of people, potentially 1 billion new Africans by the mid of the century. They don't have any availability to pay or finance. This is a poverty problem, and it's a problem of energy poverty. And the alternative existing source of energy is free, but leads to massive problems in terms of health, inefficiency, loss of biodiversity, poverty, inequality, you name it. And in a perfect world, a lot of this would be self-financing. The technology exists, and it's really simple. But this is about money, infrastructure, and institutions. And the consumers at the end of the value chain here, the supply chain, has to get access to clean cooking for free. So governments and public institutions, with the help of international finance, must finance and regulate the development of the necessary infrastructure and assets, the logistics, containers, stoves, refueling stations, etc., creating markets, as my colleague said here. And the experience from India, from which we've heard several times today, where Equinor is a large provider of LPG, we support, or we deliver more than 10% of the LPG to India now. Over the last years, that's a case to learn from. We also participate and fully support the work of the World Liquid Gas Association in this area, which is also an important actor here. The contribution from private actors is to ensure that the products and assets are available. And possibly, and maybe importantly, also to provide capital support through lenient payment conditions, longer payment terms, if necessary, to get this market running. That's a working capital contribution, which could facilitate the development of a value chain from producer to final consumer. And then when moving towards renewable fuels, private actors will be instrumental in developing the institutionalized or obligatory markets for carbon credits, etc. A rapid development of carbon credit markets to facilitate the development of clean cooking should be welcomed and addressed, also as it improves the purchasing power of those that will benefit from LPG. However, this will take time, and we should not let the best, which would be renewable LPG, stand in the way of the good, which is doing all we can to provide LPG and also LNG as a viable, clean fuel for development. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. And moving on to Sameh at the AFC, Africa Finance Corporation. Africa has some of the best carbon sinks. Non-clean cooking is a threat to carbon sinks. From AFC's perspective, how do you see those links and how to use what we have as assets, the carbon sinks, to unlock what is a challenge from a climate perspective, non-clean cooking?
Thank you very much. Let me start by quickly introducing AFC. We are a multilateral. We're 40% owned by government, 60% owned by the private sector. And our mandate is to bridge the infrastructure gap in Africa in 5 sectors, in power, natural resources, heavy industries, transport and logistics, and technology. Before I start, we have 2 mandates. One is development impact, and the second is to be profitable, to be commercial, which is an important point that I want to get back to. But before I start answering your question, this week has been a very stressful week for me, and I want to pass on some of that stress. My son has a final test in his A-levels in math. So what I'll do is that I'll give you a math exercise to solve with me. We've heard the number 950 million people not having access to clean energy. I did quite a quick Google exercise this morning. The average household in Africa is 6.9 individuals. So let's say 7 individuals. So we have 135 million households in Africa. Another staggering data point is that each household uses about 100 meters square of forest every year to use the wood. You do the math about how much of the forest is being chopped off in Africa every year. Good. So everyone is awake now? Now, what I would like to do is, what I have seen today is there are so many answers to the question, what? What is the problem? What is needed to solve it? $4 billion every year, policies by governments, etc. What I would like us to do and what we like to do at AFC is to answer the question, how? We at AFC, we're on the ground, we get things done, we see the problems, and we get them solved through our financing, through our partners, through getting projects done. And I want to focus on two sectors that are alternative sectors to cooking, unclean cooking. One is renewable energy, or energy generally, and energy access, and the other is LPG. So we are the largest renewables player in Africa. We have 16 assets in 6 countries, wind, solar, and hydro. But then again, that's not the solution. The problem is not only power generation. You have to solve for the full supply chain. You have to solve for the source of gas, if it's gas. You have to solve for the wind, for the solar, for the hydro, but then also the transmission, distribution, and the mini grids. So you have to solve for the whole chain to get to the end user, the person who's going to use that electric stove or electric engine or whatever their business is. Same thing with LPG. You cannot say, I am investing in stoves only. You cannot say, I'm investing in storage terminals only. You have to solve for the whole chain. You have to start from the gas processing, storage, distribution, and distribution is a big issue in clean cooking. Now, having said these things, I have been working in finance for 28 years, and I have met extremely bright individuals working in finance. Some of them are in this room. But the brightest, most financially savvy individual I have met is the African woman who does the calculation for her household about affordability, about what makes sense. So if the clean cooking solution does not make economic sense to the household, to the African woman, they will not pick it up. They will continue doing whatever they do. So, and this takes me to my last point, which is we are DFI, but we're also commercial. If there is no creative structuring of blended finance, of subsidies, and of grants that come along with the private sector, with institutions like us, this problem will not be solved, and we will be stuck with answering the question what and not the question how. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I couldn't agree more. As one of numerous children in my tribe, we can't count children. My mother managed that household's budget exceptionally well. That's why I'm here. From Agence Française de Développement's perspective, Emmanuel, what more can you add to the role of DFIs and their ability to serve the most demanding financial client, the one who has to benefit from clean cooking?
Thank you for the question. And first of all, on behalf of AFD, I would like really to congratulate the organizer of the summit. As clean cooking is at the core of local social and economic concern, as well as global and climate change issue. So this is very concretely a way to address and to reconcile these two. Regarding carbon finance, I don't know yet if it's carbon finance is a game changer, as I've heard, but what we are sure is that it's fully complementary to any other resources that all of us have mentioned, domestic resources, public, private, Public Development Bank also. We have here from TDB, from EIB, from World Bank, and from other colleagues from the Public Development Bank, how we need to push more in the investment in that direction, supporting the countries in their definition of their strategy, supporting investment by many ways. Coming back to the carbon finance, if we really want to reveal the potential of this new financial resource, we probably need to address few challenges that are around, especially the transparent estimation of the greenhouse emissions saved by this project, the fairness of the transaction. So at AFD, we have to be humble because we are starting to work on that carbon finance, and we have defined in a few principle or few priority I would like to share. First is make sure that the project we are supporting on the ground on clean cooking have the most important impact on any other SDGs. So let's work on education at school. Let's work on having territorial approach with the sustainable use of biomass and forestry. Let's work with SME, local SMEs. So we believe that local impact is really a priority. Second is make sure the project that we will support have a connection with the national policy. We have said that in another session. The country's leadership is key to address the issue. So let's support projects that are fully in line with the national policies in terms of decarbonization of the sectors and economic and social development, or that could be a good pilot to reform this public policy. Three is about integrity and responsibility of the buyers. Let's prioritize our supports to projects that will be in line with some buyers that are really engaged in reduction, not only buying some credit, but or engage and count on the extra for the carbons. The large emitter has to continue to take their responsibility and to reduce the emission. And last point, since time is running, is the use of the best standard, and especially the one defined by the Clean Cooking Alliance regarding transparency, regarding fairness of the and a number of other good principles that make our selectivity more important. With those key priorities, we believe that carbon finance could be maybe a game changer, but at least real and provide long-term resources for clean cooking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Clearly, there is a recurring theme across the conversations, which is carbon credits. But to unlock those, there are two other things. One is government and policies and regulations, and the other is the appropriate technology and the ability for that technology to be affordable. When we talk about innovative financing streams, blended finance keeps coming up because we're dealing with a new industry, an industry that needs scale, working in some cases to support the poorest. And so the right financing mechanism from a blended finance is critical. Which leads me to the carbon conversation. Clearly, as an important instrument, not the only one, but an important instrument in unlocking the clean cooking conversation, it's very important that it's high integrity, as we've heard. It's very important that it's in line with government policies, NDCs, and so on. But it's also very important that it's verifiable from a digital MRV perspective, and so you're able to get to scale with the right economics. My organization, along with Rockefeller Foundation and Sustainable Energy for All, created Africa Carbon Market Initiative. I'm very pleased to hear all of you reference the need for integrity, the need for transparency, and this is why this initiative exists. So collectively, we can all work towards the right financing instruments for what is right for the continent that unlock the highest climate impact while driving core benefits to our SDG goals. And with that, please join me in thanking the panel for their important contributions, and please challenge them to go ahead and write that $4 billion check every year so that we can unlock this space. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's my pleasure now to bring this session to a close, but not without thanking most sincerely the distinguished speakers and moderators, as well as my fellow co-chair, for emphasizing the importance of financing clean cooking going forward. We heard earlier about the role of clean cooking policy recommendations made by governments and leaders. We have now taken a deep dive into how to create an enabling environment for financing. The challenge ahead is large, but the spirit of this summit, the enthusiasm and the energy generated brings new clarity on the pathway ahead. Our dialogue has highlighted the importance of navigating the complex landscape of financing for clean cooking initiatives, from blended finance, leveraging on consumer funding to attract private sector capital, to developing new and innovative streams of finance, including carbon finance. The challenges ahead lies in unlocking the opportunities ahead and advance the global clean cooking agenda, and therefore derive the outcomes that were mentioned earlier, including saving more than 500,000 lives a year, and saving about 100 million hectares of land, of forest land, and finally, reducing emissions equivalent to what shipping and aviation emits currently globally. With those, it's my pleasure to close this session, and thank you very much for your attention.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the next